Work it, make it, do it, make sense.
Thanks for coming to the early session. When I first created this talk, or when it was first asked of me to speak about it, it was front ends for back-end developers. But if you look at the acronym for that, that's actually FEBED. So that doesn't sound like a very good acronym, right? So I changed it to FEDBED, which sounds a little better. FEBED, has some weird connotations. But I apologize if my voice is a little raspy or I'm sweating a little. They kept me out late last night. You know that guy with the funny hair? Mark, I think his name is? He didn't seem thirsty, but he just kept drinking. And the other guy is tall and fun to talk to, and he's got this weird obsession with like automating his home, similar to my Volkswagen problem. Dan, right? So those two guys. If you see him today, then complain to him. My name is Matt Raible. I'm a hick from the sticks. I grew up in the backwoods of Montana with no electricity and no running water. Had to walk 2 miles to the bus stop every day, and it was uphill both ways. I have an expensive obsession with Volkswagen buses and Vanagons. If you have a similar problem, I'd love to talk to you. I work for a company called Okta, and this company is cool because they have a pub in the company headquarters. So this is a picture I took when I was first out at company headquarters in San Francisco, and it's actually the office that I use when I go out there. You can basically sit at the bar and work all day, which is fun. We basically have an API for doing authentication and authorization. We support protocols such as OAuth 2, OpenID Connect, and SAML. And I don't know if you saw yesterday, but Spring Security came out with a new release, 5.0, like Milestone 1. And they have Okta as an example to authenticate against. So if you're looking for a faster speed to market and you do want to do authentication against the cloud, you can just use Spring Security. So you're not actually incorporating any code from us into your application. You're just using our open standards, and makes it easy to get up and running with an authentication and authorization in your applications. So how many people in the room consider themselves back-end developers? Is there anyone that's done front-end development? You guys are just here to test my knowledge? That's great. Anyone doing .NET? Python? Node.js? A couple people. And then Java? Everyone's hand goes up. All right. I like you people. Who writes code for UIs? There's a couple of you. Do you write it in HTML or JavaScript? Just shout it out. What are you using for a framework?
HTML, Timeleaf, Vaadin.
Timeleaf and Vaadin. Anyone else? They're like, no, we don't want to talk about it. We're using JSF. I'm sorry. Who likes JavaScript? Hands up. Okay, we got like 5. So my goal by the end of it is we're up to like 7 or 8, right, that like JavaScript. So is anyone using React? We got 1, 2, 3. Anyone using Angular? We have a couple. Ember? What about Vue.js? So it's a 0 on those last 2. So my web development journey, I actually started developing web pages in 1993. That was before Netscape 1.0 even existed. My dad talked me into it, and he was like, you can write this HTML stuff. It's pretty cool. And so I did. And I used a browser called Slipknot. And then the next year, a browser came out called Netscape. And lo and behold, the image tag worked. Right? And it was like, wow, this is pretty cool. I like, being able to see images. And then, I continued on that. And then I ended up being a Java developer, late 90s. The reason I became a Java developer was I was an HTML guy, and I would encounter bugs in the back end. And I would talk to the Java guys and say, hey, can you fix this? And they would be like, yes, but it would take them 3 or 4 days, and I'd just be sitting there twiddling my thumbs the whole time. And so I figured, maybe I can dig in and figure this out. So sure enough, I started digging into the Java code and figuring out how to do it, and I wasn't very good at it. I wrote a lot of really crappy code, but at the same time, I ended up learning a lot about Java, and I dug in and taught myself a lot and got some certifications and stuff like that. And within a year, I was like the lead Java developer, which just meant I wrote the most crappy code, right? And I had the most code in the code base, but it was a fun experience. 2001, I got into open source. I got into struts. 2004, I wrote the first book on Spring. 2004 to 2008, I kind of got lost in Springland and started doing a lot of back-end development. I got somewhat famous for doing MVC framework comparisons, right, of struts and Spring and Tapestry and JSF. I went to work for LinkedIn in 2007, and then I got back into front-end development in 2008 and 2009. And then 2010, I got into like leadership at Time Warner Cable. I did some Java at Overstock out in Salt Lake City. And then 2011 and 13, I got into jQuery, and then that turned into Angular. And then I've been doing Angular all the time since like 2015 for the most part. Last year, I started working at Stormpath on their Java team, and at the same time, I was working at Computer Associates on their Angular team. So it was funny that I would do Java in the morning, and then I'd do Angular in the afternoon. And then 2017, my favorites now are basically Java, Spring Boot, Angular, and TypeScript. And that's, when I'm not skiing or driving Volkswagens. So I have a fair amount of experience with front-end development and front-end frameworks. So what is modern front-end development? I want to hear it from you. What do you guys think it is? You're in the front row. You gotta speak up if you're in the front row.
I'm backend developer, so I don't.
But you're here to learn about what?
So yeah, but
jQuery?
no.
No.
I'm very backend. I never made the front-end.
Never done UI. Okay. Is it JavaScript? There's a few. TypeScript? Is it CSS?
Sass.
Sass? Right? It's still CSS, it just compiles differently, right? So it's interesting because one of the skills that people ask me, what are you known for? I like to say that I'm really good at CSS. Because who's good at CSS? Nobody. Right? So it's very unique, to say you're good at CSS. And for the most part, the reason I'm good at CSS is just because I've done it for 20 years. Right? And I know that there's different tweaks in different browsers and stuff like that. The CSS frameworks have gotten better, so it's easier now than it was. But it's still one of those skills that really comes down to experience for the most part. So front-end development has changed a lot since 2005. Remember the good old days of like struts and Spring MVC? And then we got this awesome new framework called JSF. And that was supposed to be the savior for Java. But what happened around the same time, you'll see there in 2004, Flex 1.0 and Spring 1.0. Those were very powerful at the time compared to JSF. They made it really nice for developers to be able to write code and get it quickly to the screen. And I think if you talk to anyone that's done Flex development, chances are they'll be like, that was a good experience. I'm sad it went away. JSF, not so much. But then what happened was the Java framework explosion came along. And so they used to make fun of Java frameworks, Java web frameworks, because we had so many. And then all of a sudden, the JavaScript web frameworks came out, and there was a new one every day. So now there's, not a new one every week, but like 2 years ago there was. And so some leaders have started to emerge. And now we've got into like progressive web apps, right? Web apps that are basically apps that you can download onto your phone and it sticks in your browser and it's almost just like, a regular native app. And we have web frameworks that write native apps. We have Ionic and NativeScript and React Native, right? So it's really come a long way in the sense that you can write HTML in the sense of React Native and it actually produces components on the phone. It doesn't actually use any HTML. It doesn't use PhoneGap or anything like that. So this can be overwhelming if you're new to the space. So if you are a back-end developer and you're looking to get into front-end development, you've heard of all these frameworks and stuff, you might want to read this article because it's pretty funny. It talks about you just learned this and now it's out of fashion. You just learned this and now it's out of fashion. So you were new to your current space, though, at one point. And the question is, were you overwhelmed then? When you first started learning Java, for instance? Maybe, but you were probably very curious too, right? You were new to it, and you were into it, and you were willing to learn. And rather than being bitter about new frameworks, you were just excited to learn, what Java offered. So, I think front-end engineer and how that works now has become a whole new meaning, right? Front-end engineer is now a thing, and that's because we've added all this complexity to the front end but it's because they've given us the power, and there's a lot more capabilities in the browser than there ever was. So back when you first learned Java, and when you first got into programming, it was a great time in your life. So today what I'm trying to do is teach you that it can be a great time in your life as far as front-end development is concerned too. So when you were first getting into programming, you're all happy about learning something new every day. That same experience can come in front-end development. So learning is the ultimate skill. It's not knowing Angular, it's not knowing React, it's the ability to learn. That's really where the power comes as a programmer, the willingness to learn and the willingness to be curious. So I hope you're all curious. So let's do some learning. So we have a number of different JavaScript versions. ES5 was basically released in 1999, which was the same year as what browser? Any guesses? 99. It's been a while. IE6. And at the time, it was awesome, right? It was better than the previous versions. It had AJAX capabilities, and it was just really great for a web developer to work with. And then 10 years later, people are still using it, and it's like, stop, please stop. So ES6 came along, and that's also known as ECMAScript 2015, and that has classes and modules. So not just functions like normal JavaScript, but more like classes like we have in Java. And then we have ES7, which is technically ECMAScript 2016. It was finalized in June of last year, and it has features like the exponential operator and array includes. So you can do an includes on an array. There's also an ES7 feature called a decorator. It looks just like an annotation in Java. They've actually taken that out, so that's no longer part of it. But TypeScript has that. So if you're doing Angular development or you're using TypeScript, it actually has that annotation that you can use. So all browsers have good support for ES5. Browser support for ES6 is pending. You can see there that IE11 doesn't have it, and it's not going to have it because they've created a new browser now called Edge. Classes support is almost at 75%, and modules is at 5%. So the browsers still have a ways to go to catch up and support all of the features of ES6. So what TypeScript looks like, here's how you can install it. So you install Node.js, and then you can install npm install -g TypeScript, and that gives you the ability to write a function like this. The only real difference between regular JavaScript and this function is there's a type. So similar to how in Java you would have a string space, variable name, this has variable name : string. And then you can use this tsc command to compile that, and this is all from the TypeScript documentation. There's also other things. I mean, JavaScript has types, right? Number, string, and Boolean, and TypeScript adds additional types like a tuple and an enum and an any and a void, so those are all types that you can use. It also has static types and interfaces and generics. All those exist in TypeScript. So if you're a Java developer and you're looking to get into front-end development, I would highly encourage you to look at TypeScript just because it's very familiar to you and it'll be easier for you to adapt to than regular JavaScript. And the cool thing about the TypeScript compiler is you can actually run it on existing JavaScript code, and it'll tell you if variables aren't being used or if other things are wrong, with your code. So it's more about classes and functions. For example, here's a bus class, and you'll see it has a constructor. It's not like constructors in Java where you have, a public and then class name. It's just called constructor. And then you'll see that looks like an Elvis operator there, where it basically says that name parameter is optional. You don't have to pass it in there. And then there's getters and setters for the name. And how that works is you do class name dot variable equals, and that will call the setter. And then the same thing with the getter, you do class name dot whatever the variable name is, and that pulls the value. So you don't actually call getter set. You just use that syntax, and it calls those methods. And then you can see at the bottom we have some string interpolation with the backticks, and you can see this bus's name is, and it reads a local variable. So TypeScript 2.3 I know it's kind of hard to read there. It brings type checking to JavaScript files. So you can see this is a visual of vcode, and it basically, you type in a comment at the top, and then it detects a whole bunch of JavaScript errors. Even though we're not in a TypeScript file, we're in a JavaScript file, you can actually have it so it recognizes and parses your code that way. So before you can really do anything with JavaScript, or you're writing code for the front end, you'll basically need to install Node. So you probably heard of Node. You know that a lot of people use it for back-end development, but it's really the power behind front-end development now, because it allows us to run build tools, it allows us to install things, and do a lot of the stuff that you normally do on the back end. So before you can write any TypeScript or ES6 and have it compile down to ES5, you need to use Node. So basically you can install it from nodejs.org, and then there's this nice tool called NVM that allows you to switch between Node versions. So you might need that, especially if you're doing back-end development with Node, to switch between like a 4x version and a 6x version. Just makes it all really easy. So the next thing you'll get into after you've installed Node is a build tool. It used to be Gulp. Before that it was Grunt. And we had some build tools war in the front-end space. New school is kind of System.js. A lot of people are using that as well. But the hip one is Webpack. That's what everyone's kind of moved to in the last year. As far as pulling down web dependencies like we do in Java, old school is Bower, new school is NPM, and now the real hip one is Yarn. So Yarn is yet another resource negotiator, and it's from Facebook. And the reason they created it was just because NPM basically installs all these web dependencies in your project, and it doesn't do any caching. So if you have multiple projects going, there's no sharing of resources between those projects. And so what Yarn allows you to do is it actually caches like what you've downloaded previously, and it just installs things much faster. So Yeoman is another tool that people use often to create projects. It's basically the scaffolding tool for modern web apps, helps you kickstart new projects, and promotes the Yarn workflow. The Yarn workflow is basically having some tool that creates projects like Yeoman. And it's cool because the command's yo, like yo create me a project. And then the build tool, which is like Grunt or Gulp, and then a package manager like Bower or NPM. And you have easy installation of new JavaScript libraries. You have build and optimization of JavaScript files with Grunt or Gulp, or even Webpack. And then you have testing with Karma and Phantom, are popular choices. Phantom.js is a headless browser. And we've recently started, Chrome came out with a headless version in the last month, and so people are using that more than Phantom.js now. So Browsersync is another great tool. I think I had a video, but it's not playing anymore. Browsersync, what it allows you to do is basically have a number of different browsers. So yeah, you can see the video playing now. The guy basically modifies the code, and it changes all the different browsers. And it even works if you're doing something with iOS Simulator. You see here, this is actually iOS Simulator there, and it'll reload that browser as well. So it's great if you're testing or your app needs to work in multiple browsers. So this is what Gulp looks like. It's like Ant kind of, where you have tasks. You can set up browser sync, and then you can watch files, and when any files change, you reload browser sync. So if you're familiar with Ant or you're familiar with tasks and Gradle, Gulp will make sense to you. Webpack is a whole new ballgame. So Webpack is a module bundler for modern JavaScript applications. When Webpack processes your application, it recursively builds a dependency graph that includes every module your application needs, and then it packages all those modules into smaller bundles. And there's often only one to be loaded by the browser. As you get bigger and bigger applications, it'll do code splitting for you, so you can have multiple modules and it'll handle that. It's incredibly configurable, and to get started, you only need to understand 4 concepts, which is basically entry, output, loaders, and plugins. So here's what a Webpack config looks like. You can see there's the entry and the output. It tells it where to go, and then the modules for the loaders. And it tells you basically for every .js file, load it with Babel and process it that way. And so if you're doing TypeScript, you would use a similar loader. For TypeScript, there's an awesome TypeScript plugin, for instance, that processes all the TS files and turns them into JavaScript files. So a couple of features that are cool about Webpack is there's a Webpack bundler analyzer and Webpack dashboard. So I'll post these slides after the presentation. You can actually click on these links. The bundler analyzer will tell you the size of your bundles and how you can make them smaller. The dashboard will basically, in your browser, show you the errors. So instead of looking in your browser console, you can look, right in your browser and see it. So this is a great recommendation that I have for a practical introduction into Webpack. This guy, Ivan Akaluv, a senior engineer at EPAM, has basically been working with Webpack for a while, and he's written these 3 blog posts. So the first one he has out is building front end and adding compilation, and then he has a couple more coming out this month. So if you want to see the latest and greatest information on that, he's a good resource. But what I really like is it's brought back compiling. So it's now actually on the projects that I work on that have like Angular and TypeScript, it's actually slower to build the front end than to build the back end. So you can, sword fight with your friends in the hallway or, go get a new cup of coffee. So now to dig into one of the things that people think about when they actually do front-end development is what framework should I use? So in my opinion, my gut feel is that the leading JavaScript frameworks are Angular, React, and Vue.js. This is based on traffic patterns that we've seen both at Stormpath and Okta and on Scotch.io. We get some information about what they see. And it's also based on stats. And this guy. So Eric Elliott is a popular guy that talks about JavaScript a lot, and he wrote an article earlier this year that basically says, here's the top frameworks that I recommend in JavaScript. And there's another one I found on HackerNoon, says the same thing, basically Angular, React, Vue. They also have Ember.js and Meteor in there, but it's fun to talk about 3 rather than 5. So here's what Eric wrote. Angular and React dominate. Nothing else comes close. React is winning mind share and customer satisfaction battles. And then down at the bottom there, frameworks to watch, Vue.js, right? Ton of GitHub stars and a lot of downloads, and a lot of people are using it. So there's also jobs on Indeed.com. You can see that Angular and React are in the lead. Stack Overflow tags, Angular, React again, GitHub stars. Funny, it's not Angular, but Vue is up there, right? So a lot of people are starring it on GitHub. So with Angular, it looks simple enough. You're just doing hello world. You import component, you use that component decorator, and then you have an export class that's basically similar to doing public class in Java. And then you'll see at the bottom there the tag, right? My-app. And so that's basically refers to the selector there, and that's how you do hello world with Angular. But that's not really how you do it, because you also have to have an ng module, which you see here. It declares that component. It has a number of imports that it can use, and then it bootstraps it. And then you also end up with another main.ts file that kind of makes everything work. So you can't actually do hello world with Angular anymore in one file. You have to have several files. Of course, you could put all those classes in the same file, but there's no easy and concise way to do hello world. So you can get started with Angular very easily with Angular CLI. You can see how to install it, npm install -g, and ng new to create a new app, and then cd into it and run ng serve. So here's what that looks like. It basically creates a new project, and then you can go into it and run it. So just to show you what that looks like, I actually recorded an animated GIF. You'll notice that took 1.5 minutes to run, but I made it work in 16 seconds. So it's, fun to watch the GIF. So there's also Angular Quick Start, which is from the Angular docs, and there's an Angular seed that you can use. Angular seed, you basically just clone the whole project, and then you cd into it, and you start developing with it. There's another one called Angular Seed Advanced. that has a few more things in it. It's got NGRX store for RxJS, powered state management inspired by Redux. It's got internationalization with ng translate, and it's got native script. It's got Electron support. So if you've ever used Slack or you've used Atom, those are both built on Electron, which basically means that it's Chrome bundled in an application that you can install, on your desktop. So I've written a number of tutorials as part of my NG demo project. So that is a project on GitHub. It has branches for integrating Angular material, for integrating Bootstrap 4, and for integrating Okta to do authentication. And then these videos are videos that I've done in the past on Angular. The building one is a webinar that I did in January on Angular, and the testing one is a talk that I did at JFocus in February. And here is a tutorial that you can do on how to develop against Okta's API. That bit.ly link goes to that document in that NG demo project that shows you how to actually authenticate against our API. This YouTube video is great. It's part of the OpenID project, and it's by this guy that's just got like the smoothest voice ever. And it's only 5 minutes long, but if you have some time, I recommend watching it because it's kind of like a Zen moment where you're like, wow, that was just fun to listen to that guy. The other thing that you can do once you've known Angular is you can write Ionic applications. So Ionic is a framework built on PhoneGap or Cordova that allows you to actually take your app that you've written in HTML and JavaScript and put it on the phone, as well as talk to all the APIs that the phone has if you want to talk to the camera or anything like that. So the cool thing is once you know Angular, you pretty much know Ionic. There's not much more to learn there. If you're into Angular and you want to learn more, I recommend NG Book 2. I think it's great that it's a comprehensive guide to developing with Angular 4, and it's named NG Book 2. But it's worth your money, and I'd recommend it. So the other popular one is React. To do Hello World with React, it looks a lot different, especially because you basically have this React DOM and render. And you'll notice in that render block, there's HTML. So it's not returning variables or anything like that. It's actually returning HTML. And then that document get element by ID binds it to that root in the HTML tag there. My favorite React video is from Eric Vicente. It's an intro to React. And basically, in an hour, you can learn pretty much most of the concepts that you need to be productive with React. He talks about imperative code and how you can add an element, modify an element, move elements around, remove elements, and it's very verbose and it's very difficult, right? For you, for instance, this is an example of taking the badge from Facebook and you add icons, right? You add numbers on it because you have 4 or 5 notifications. I didn't even know this, but apparently if you have more than 99 notifications, you get flames on your notifications icon. So that's the has fire and the has badge. And then declarative code defines the UI you want, whereas imperative is more adding and modifying elements. So this shows that same code is much easier when you're using React. If count equals 0, then it just returns the div, right? And it basically diffs the HTML each time. So it's kind of like Git in your browser in the sense that if it returns the second conditional and it's already returned the first one, all it's going to do is add that span. It's not going to actually repopulate, everything from that div. So it enables both imperative and declarative, and props define what a component is and state defines what a component is. So if you have a lot of state in your application and things need to change a lot, React is highly recommended for that. So there's a create React app, which is similar to the Angular CLI, and it makes it super easy to develop React applications. You can see you do npm install there, and then you create it, and then you go into it. And so this is what that looks like. Can take a couple minutes. You'll notice this took 1 minute and 13 seconds. So let's see what that looks like. the biggest time consumer is installing everything. I did speed up the video. You can see that's what it looks like. So the cool thing about creating a new React application with that is it ships with all their documentation. So you can see I checked my project into GitHub, my cool app, and it has how to do everything in its README. So you don't have to go even find another site or anything. You actually have all that information in there. Hello World with Vue.js can be done in very few lines of code. You can see we have our div ID app up there, and then we bind to it with this EL and the hash app, and then data is where we put all our data. So if you have any things in there, it could be message, it could be key, it could be value, it will automatically be read up in your HTML, and you can bind to those variables. So I found this video, which is pretty good, from Coding Explained, and but it doesn't have a GitHub project to go with it, so you're just basically watching the video and trying to code along, versus that React one I talked about. The guy actually shows you code, and then he has a GitHub project where you can go and like follow along and copy and paste code. So this one's good though, and it explains a lot of what Vue is. It shows you at the top, you can still just import it with a script tag, and then how you write handlers is you use v-whatever. So you can see on : click, it calls the clicked button, and then that goes into a function that you can put whatever logic you want into it. So it comes with a CLI as well, Vue CLI. You can do npm install for that, and then you init it and you give it a template name and then a project name. So it basically prompts you for a number of different things. I know it's tough to read, but it says basically project name is my cool app, project description, it just has a default in there, and then it reads your author information from your Git info, and then it says, do you want to install the Vue router? Do you want to use ESLint? Do you want to pick an ESLint preset? You can use standard, you can use Airbnb, and then it basically creates your project from that information. What it does not do is it does not run npm install. So it's much faster than the other ones, just because all it does is generate a few, lines of code and doesn't run the install for you. So here's what that looks like. Vue init, Webpack, for instance, my cool app. So you can see this is the fastest one. It actually executes in 17 seconds. It doesn't do that npm install, so it doesn't take another minute. So one of the cool things that's emerged with these frameworks is server-side support, which means you can actually render it on the server just like we've always done with our MVC frameworks in Java. Angular Universal used to be the name of Angular support. Now it's merged into Angular 4, so it's no longer a separate project. If you want to see a cool React app, it's mobile.twitter.com. They just released this last month, and it makes it very easy to basically use your phone and pull up, this mobile app, and it sticks in your browser. It's a progressive web app, and it works really nicely. Nuxt.js is the one that's popular for Vue. In Java land, you can use Spring Boot if you want for React to render it on the server. And basically what it means when it renders it on the server is it processes that initial HTML, spits it to the browser, but it also still has those scripts in there to do all the JavaScript interaction after it's been sent to the browser. There's also Spring Boot Angular Render. These all use like the Nashorn engine from Java 8, and basically process your JavaScript and then send it to the client. So I think Commit Strip is a great cartoon, and they illustrate the problem well, in that the challenge is choosing a framework. You'll see here the challenge when choosing a JS framework is to jump onto the right train at the right moment. If you jump too soon, you don't know where you'll end up. But if you wait too long, you get left behind. How do you know which was the right train? You can see here that some of them have left the station. Some of them are canceled. For instance, Prototype, Angular 1, who knows? Angular 2, maybe late, maybe not. So it's a tough thing to do, but what I recommend is basically learning one and investigating a second one. You know, try to learn one, do it well, but also don't be afraid of, you know, the alternative or the competitor. So cascading style sheets, this is something that people struggle with a lot, right? How do I do CSS? You can see that the top one is a hash app. That's binding to an ID in HTML. The second one is a class.blog post, so that's binding to class equals in HTML. The third one is actually binding to the first child in two different ways. So we have this greater than sign basically is saying any element P right below that. So it's not just the first one, but then you have pseudo selectors to go into the actual first one. And the last one shows how you do sibling syntax. So it's saying that, you know, I have an image, but at the same level as the image, I have a span. So that allows you to just, you know, modify that element. But the better thing is Sass, syntactically awesome style sheets. They allow you to do more programming in your CSS and to have nested classes, and it basically produces, you know, what you actually want to write, and it's great. So if you're going to do CSS, I recommend using Sass. There's a number of CSS frameworks. These are the ones that I have a gut feel are the most popular. There's Skeleton, which is dead simple. Haha, right? Skeleton. Dead simple, responsive boilerplate, doesn't even have a logo. There's Pure CSS, which is from Yahoo, and then there's Bootstrap, and there's Foundation. And Bootstrap basically is the most popular one, and what it really does is it makes your buttons look good. That's its like real claim to fame, right? You can actually have a primary style, and it looks like a button that you should click, versus everything else might be a little bit different. And you're just adding classes, so it's very easy to integrate it into most projects. And basically Bootstrap 4 is the latest version. It's still an alpha, has a great grid system that you can use to lay out your components. So on GitHub, Bootstrap is the most popular, and then Foundation second, Pure, and then Skeleton. The other thing you're going to want to do as a front-end developer is optimize your code. So the biggest way to do that is reducing your HTTP requests as well as gzipping everything. So browsers, way back since before even IE6, supported this gzip concept, which basically allows you to compress all of your text-based assets, whether it's HTML or CSS or JavaScript. It can compress them up to 70% before it sends it to the browser. The other thing is far futures expires headers. That's very important. And then code minification, and even bigger is optimizing your images. Has anyone done front-end optimization on a project? How'd it go?
Yeah, it was right the first time.
Yeah?
And the second time, the browser cached everything.
Right. So it's one of those things that it does give you a lot, but it only gives you a lot on that first render. And now that we have single-page applications, that's really your only concern. What I found is a lot of clients that used to hire me to do optimization hired me to do backend optimization. Right? They were like, hey, this web page takes a while to render. Can you look at our Java code and tell us what we're doing wrong? And what I found more times than not was it was actually the front end. That was the problem. It was gzipping. It was expires headers. They weren't doing that. And just by adding those, we were able to speed things up by double. So HTTP2 is the other way of speeding things up. It's binary instead of textual. Fully multiplexed, so it basically keeps a connection open and sends information on that same connection. Does parallel requests. Uses header compression to reduce overhead, and allows servers to push their responses. So if you're using JHipster, you can see here that we detect if it's undertow, and then undertow has an option of setting it to HTTP2. You see the protocol in the Chrome Developer Tools says H2. You can also do HTTP2 push, server push. what this allows you to do is push assets to the browser, and then this second print writer where it sends HTML, it won't actually make the request for that image because it's already been pushed by the browser. I think this is a great diagram of HTTP and how it works. I'll just go through it quickly. If you want to look after at the slides, it helps, but it really explains that HTTP 2 is a lot faster. For Chrome developer tools, you're going to want to use Chrome if you're a front-end developer. It's pretty much the best browser, even though it hogs memory. I recommend following these two guys, Umar and Adi Osmani. They're basically the experts in the Chrome developer toolkit and how to use modern dev tools. This is actually a course here, moderndevtools.com. You can sign up for it. I think it's like $60 US dollars, and it basically will level you up on how to do development with Chrome. Progressive web apps are also very popular. You need 3 things to do a progressive web app. Secure origin, so HTTPS, load while offline, that's service workers, and then a web app manifest that tells how to install an application. And unfortunately, it all works great in Firefox and Chrome, not in Safari. So because service workers aren't supported in Safari, kind of takes a lot of the fun away because it doesn't work on iPhone, right? You can install Chrome on iPhone, but not many people do. So if you're developing web apps, should you do responsive or mobile-first web design? Who thinks responsive? Who thinks mobile-first? We have a couple of you, okay. So most people do responsive. And responsive basically means that you're developing on your 30-inch monitor, and then you shrink it down and make it look good on a phone. But the problem with doing that versus mobile-first is you develop and you make your browser look like a phone, and then you make it look good on the big monitor as well. That's better to do mobile first, because what it allows you to do is oftentimes you'll remove a lot of features, right? Because you just want to show it works on the phone, and then when you make it bigger, you add features in. So I think it's great to develop mobile first, especially when working with product people, because you can say that's too many features, it doesn't really look good on a small screen. And so mobile first is basically just testing with mobile before you actually test with your desktop and your big monitor. So we failed on mobile for the most part as web developers. A recent report from DoubleClick said that 3G connection, most people should have the web page render in 3 minutes, but 53% of sites are abandoned if a mobile site takes more than 3 seconds. Or not, yeah. And the same report said that the average mobile site loads in 19 seconds. So most people are abandoning, mobile sites because they take too long to load. And the reason we failed on mobile is because these guys, these laptops, they're filthy liars, right? They don't tell what most people's experience is like. They don't tell what a $200 Android device actually renders your site in. So $200 Android device is ground truth. If you're developing for the masses in the world, especially people in India and Africa, you should have a $200 Android device, and you should use it and test your applications with it. So mobile hates you, and the ways to fight back are implement the purple pattern, get that Android device, use Chrome Inspect, and inspect tracing to actually see how long things are taking to load. Lighthouse is a Chrome plugin that'll tell you if you're developing a progressive web app correctly. And then you can use tools in Chrome to do network and CPU throttling as well. The purple pattern is push, render, pre-cache, and lazy load. So you push the critical resources, you render the initial route, you pre-cache the remaining routes, and you lazy load everything else. So I published a blog post this week on the Okta developer blog that talks about how to develop a progressive web app with Angular. If you're interested in learning more about that, please visit. We also have security in the OWASP top 10. SQL injection is a big part of the first one, but it's also Christ-like scripting is another form of injection. Basically, if you have people that put data into your application and you're rendering that, for instance, if it's HTML based, you want to escape and sanitize everything. Don't allow script tags in there. You can pretty much read the rest of them. But the cool thing is OWASP hasn't updated it in like 4 years, and this is a release candidate. So they plan to release the final OWASP top 10 in July or August of this year, but this is the current recommendation. The other way that you can get started with a lot of this front-end stuff is with JHipster. It's a Yeoman generator, and it has a Spring Boot backend and an Angular front-end, and it generates a project for you. It also has support for microservices, and I wrote a book about it. This is a free book, so you can download that from InfoQ. It's written in ASCII Doctor, and I wrote basically a project that you can use to start your own book. So mini books are great. If you want to write one for InfoQ, I'd be happy to help you do that. The cool thing is you don't have to get into the topic too much, right? Because it's supposed to be a mini book. It's not supposed to be a full-fledged book. So hopefully you've learned a bit about ES6 and TypeScript and Node and NVM and Angular, React, and Vue, CSS and Sass, and front-end performance optimization. The biggest thing that I'd recommend is just try front-end development and be curious. UI development is awesome because you can see the results immediately. It's a great thing to teach kids. So if you can, teach kids. And don't forget to test. Focus on quality. Use Karma and Protractor, use Travis and Jenkins, and that's still going to be a big part of how you do front-end applications. Unit tests are very simple to write. You have describe, and it is basically the core backbone of using Jasmine to test your JavaScript code. And then you can see here, again, pretty easy stuff. There's also Jest, which is a new framework. So instead of Jasmine and Protractor, Jest is a runner, so things are very fast. It also it is used a lot in React applications. So don't be afraid to try new things. Learn JavaScript. Try one of the frameworks. Form your own opinions, and be curious. Check out the developer blog on Okta. I've got a lot of good tutorials coming up soon about how to do Spring Cloud microservices and build Ionic apps, do JHipster microservices, and this summer there'll be some other good posts on there. So any questions? Yeah?
So the problem I came across a while back with using, I think it was either NPM or Grunt, was it was all great the first time, and then something updated some version somewhere, and I was used to this Maven ecosystem where I sort of just worked it out and brought those versions in, but it just sort of gave me a load of questions like, do you want version X of this or Y of that? I mean, is that improved? Is there something that's
So Maven has support for ranges, right? You can say, hey, I want 3.0, but if there's a 3.01, go ahead and give me that, or 3.02, go ahead and give me that. No one uses that, right? Because they know that it might break between 3.0 and 3.01, and package.json for the JavaScript ecosystem is the same way. But a lot of these projects, when they generate themselves, they basically say, they have like this caret, right, or this tilde. The caret says you can upgrade to the next minor version, right? And the tilde is like the next, incremental version or whatever. Take those out. Make sure in hard code, whatever you have in package.json, as the specific version, so you know that it gives you that version every time and it doesn't automatically upgrade, because people aren't that good at semantic versioning. They don't think they broke anything, but they did. So that's my recommendation there. Anyone else? Well, thanks for coming.